Hey everybody, this is Joe Robinson, and this year I managed to read 85 books. And in this short video, I'd like to share with you my routine, how I went about doing that, so that you may do it too. I want to communicate a passion for learning, a passion for curiosity. Reading has really transformed my life. It's made me a more interesting person, a more confident person, and I really enjoyed the experience of reading these books. So first I'll go through, my routine and habits, talk about how I found, more time in the day to read more, that kind of thing. Then I'll go through, just a little bit of a rundown of my favorite books this year that I read. So my basic routine is I read 30 minutes in the morning, 30 minutes, during the course of the day, usually, after lunch, something like that, and then 30 minutes before bed. And that's it on an average day. I also read a lot of audiobooks. So I'll read audiobooks when I'm driving, when I'm exercising, when I'm making food. And I'll listen to audiobooks with Audible on like 1.25 speed or 1.5 times speed. Sometimes if it's kind of a slow, person narrating the audiobook. And on Sundays, typically I have kind of a chill day, and I'll just, allow myself to get lost in books. And, I might read for 3 to 4 hours over the course of a Sunday. So I kind of just more, binge read, then. And I really enjoy the routine of doing that. I find that I read more philosophical or more difficult books in the morning. And in the evening I read, books that, like I wouldn't read Friedrich Nietzsche in the evening. That's going to make, me have nightmares potentially. I use this little timer, and I just set it to 30 minutes, and I click it on, and I'll just read away, and I'll keep an eye on that timer. And I also keep journals. I'm a musician. I keep a practice journal, and I also kind of mark, tick off when I've hit my reading goals. I think having goals is really important. And my goal for this year was actually to read 100 books, but I got to about September and realized that in order to read 100, I'd have to read, really short books, or just like read for a lot more time than I was prepared to. And I just thought, I'm good with whatever number I end up hitting. And that number ended up being 85. So there you go. I think it's important to pick books that you're interested in. I've found that when I find a really good book, it'll lead me into another really good book. And when I find a really good author that I like, it'll lead me into another, series of great thinkers and writers. This year I read mostly nonfiction, although next year I'm planning on reading more fiction, more literary fiction. Last year I read War and Peace, and I think that was just such an epic book that took me so long that I kind of was just like, all right, no more fiction for a while. In terms of finding more time in the day, I don't have a TV. I don't, have the news going or anything during the day. Occasionally I'll go down a YouTube rabbit hole. Occasionally I'll watch films, or I'll, binge watch a TV series here and there, but it's been a while since I've done that. Generally speaking, I've just really built up this habit of reading, and I think that's the most important thing. Some people have emailed me, saying that they've seen, my books my videos where I talk about the books I read, and they've, started reading more themselves, and they've said they've had issues with retaining the information in the books. And, I don't think it's, something to be too concerned about. I think the important thing is just to develop the habit of reading and to find books that you're interested in. I think that you get better at retaining information as you do it more. And, I find in a book the best ideas are going to jump out, and it's impossible to retain everything you read. So you're just kind of sifting through for the best ideas. That's the way I like to think of it. I also quit caffeine this year, and I feel like that has given me, more energy and made me less likely to peak and crash during the day. I also eat a ketogenic diet for the most part. I've been eating that way for about 2 to 3 years now. I'm not super strict on it. In fact, I guess it's kind of more of a slow carb way of eating. Sometimes I'll include sweet potatoes and pumpkin, squash, that kind of thing. But for the most part, it's fairly low carb. And I also fast 16 hours, on a typical day. Like I said, sometimes I'll change it up, but, on average, that's kind of what I do. And that seems to be the routine that makes me feel the best. It feels the best for me mentally as well as physically. And keeps my mood pretty consistent as well. So I find that's really important in general. So that's basically how I do it. In terms of my favorite books that I read this year, here are some of my books that I can, wholeheartedly recommend and that I enjoyed and honestly will probably read again, because a lot of books this year were rereads for me. First up, Nassim Taleb's Inserto Series. So that includes books The Black Swan, Anti-Fragile, Skin in the Game, Fooled by Randomness, and The Bed of Procrustes. These are all great, and I really, really am a fan of Nassim Taleb. He's a very charismatic person, and a great writer. His books are interesting start to finish, and they're full of surprises and just really interesting aphorisms. And I've read, all the books in the Inserto series multiple times, several of them, in book form as well as audiobook form. And, a good one to start with might be The Black Swan. It's his most popular book. It was a, really popular book at the time. Next up, Will Durant's Story of Civilization. I've read two books from that series this year, Our Oriental Heritage and The Life of Greece. It's really an incredible series, and I'm looking forward to making my way through the other books. Will Durant and his wife Ariel wrote, this, history of civilization, and they wrote it over a span of about 50 years. And they're incredibly dense books. I love the way they're written, and they really fill in so many gaps for me. I read Will's Story of Philosophy about 3 years ago now, I think, and that book really opened my eyes up, and I really, really love that book. Next up, The Will to Power by Robert Solomon and Kathleen Higgins. It's about the philosophy of Friedrich Nietzsche. And this is an audiobook put out by the Great Courses. I listened to it on Audible. And, Kathleen and Robert are married. And I think these are lectures from University of Texas, which is where they used to teach, I think. I think Robert's passed away now. But, their dynamic and passion for Nietzsche's writing is really infectious, and it's a great way to just get a bit of a big picture view on Nietzsche's ideas. Nietzsche gets a bad rap from people who don't understand him, because his sister took his works and they became associated with the Nazi Party through her, but he was actually passionately against anti-Semitism and was really a sweet, interesting, sensitive man. And I Beyond Good and Evil is absolutely an incredible book, as well as The Antichrist, which I think is important for people who are Christian to read as well. I think it's a really good criticism of Christianity. Joel Salatin, Folks, This Ain't Normal. I love the way Joel communicates. He's a really fascinating person. He is kind of one of the main figures in the grass-fed, pasture-raised, regenerative agriculture movements, and Folks This Ain't Normal is a great book just about, how bizarre the modern world is. And, I grew up on a farm. I grew up out in the bush. I grew up, living off the land and, living in America and, living in any city is kind of just, it's so different from our agrarian past. And Joel does a great, Joel communicates that in a really entertaining and effective way. And really, really cool guy. I'd love to meet him someday. Food by Mark Hyman. This is a great book. It's kind of just a no-nonsense book about nutrition. I think, the little subheading is food. What the heck should I eat? So that's a really great book. I listened to it on audio and I've read that a few times now. Tom T. Hall, The Songwriters Handbook. This is a great book about, the old school Nashville writing, the way they used to do it. And I heard Rodney Crowell talk about this book. Rodney is a good friend of mine and a great mentor and one of the great songwriters of our time. And this book by Tom T. Hall is really, really cool. I recommend it. By the way, I usually buy used books, and sometimes, I can pay $5 to $7 for a book. Next up, The Inner Game of Fingerstyle Guitar by Adam Rafferty. Adam Rafferty is a friend of mine, and this is a great book about fingerstyle guitar. There ain't many books about fingerstyle guitar, and Adam, really goes into the mindset behind, the way he approaches composing and arranging and playing the guitar. And I really like the way Adam writes and thinks, and he's been an influence on my music. We spent a good bit of time together when I was 17, 18, playing at different guitar festivals, conventions together, and being on tour here and there. And yeah, he's a really great guy, and it's a great book for any guitar players out there. Speaking of guitar players, Texas Flood, The Story of Stevie Ray Vaughan. This is an audio book, and it's really, really well done. It's a pretty new book. It was put together, featuring interviews with his old bandmates and his brother Jimmy Vaughan. And, Stevie was truly a legend and a pioneer. And, this book, I think, really captures his personality. He was a really spirited musician and a really spirited person. So highly recommend that book for sure. Gad Saad, The Parasitic Mind. Growing up in Australia, I feel like you develop a pretty good BS detector. I feel like that's just kind of built into the culture. And, we live in this kind of pretty sensationalized world where everything's dramatic and, everyone's stressed. And I think Gad Saad's book kind of cuts to the heart of that in a refreshing way. Gad grew up in Lebanon during, some trying times. And, I really appreciate his satirical take on the modern world. Influenced by Robert Cialdini. I'm not exactly sure how to pronounce his last name, but he's a professor out in Phoenix, I believe, or in Arizona somewhere. And this book is really just about the psychology of persuasion, and kind of, it's quite marketing heavy, the book. I've read quite a few marketing books this year and have enjoyed that. I think, musicians can really stand to learn about marketing. I think the people winning in the music game right now are the people who have their marketing down. So that's just, my observation, and I've definitely gotten a lot from learning more about marketing. Gary Keller, The One Thing. This is a great book about focusing on, asking yourself the focusing question. What is the one thing I can be doing now that will make other things easier, everything else easier? And I find myself, asking that question, as often as I can remember to, and it always helps me. The book is kind of based around the 80-20 Pareto principle, that 80% of the results come from 20% of the effort. And it's a great book. And Gary Keller is also a guitar player, which is cool to know. So Talent is Overrated by Geoff Colvin. This is a great book, and I put out a video earlier this year called Talent is BS, And basically I just riffed on some of Geoff's ideas and talked about my experience of, people labeling me as talented, which, thank you for the compliment, but I get a little bit miffed when I feel like people don't recognize their own ability to be great, their own potential to be great, and they just dismiss someone else as being talented, because I think everyone has just a reservoir of untapped potential that, is really, really extraordinary. And to me, reading and learning and, as Socrates would say, becoming just less ignorant in general is a great way to realize your potential and to really just put out good energy into the world. So the final book that I marked as one of my favorites this year is Roots, Radicals, and Rockers by Billy Bragg, which is a really great book. It was given to me by some of my extended family out in Manhattan Beach, California. And it's a history of skiffle music over in the UK. And so the skiffle kind of scene, predated the Beatles and influenced the Beatles a lot. They grew up playing in skiffle bands. And skiffle was basically the British folks taking American jazz from New Orleans as well as Delta blues. And, when there'd be hits on the airwaves in America, the British artists would copy them, and everyone would do their own version of the most popular song at the time. It's a really cool window into how that kind of relationship worked between American rhythm and blues and what became the British invasion. And I didn't really, I wasn't aware of exactly how that played out. So that was a really interesting book to read. So anyway, I hope this video has been interesting to you. My goals for next year are to read, like I said, more fiction, more literary fiction. There's so many great books to dive into. I like older books in general. I feel like, people just thought differently before. A lot of modern books to me is, like I said, is one or two good ideas and then a lot of filler. And older books seem to have more to say somehow. And I also am looking forward to reading more about, I want to read about classical music history. That's something that I feel like I don't know enough about as a musician, the history of the great composers. So I'm planning on reading a number of biographies of the great composers and getting a feel for just the timeline of how classical music developed. Because, some of those pieces are really lindy, as Nassim Taleb would say, meaning they stand the test of time. They've been around a long time, and they're probably going to be around a long time, and I hope to make music that stands the test of time. I also am looking forward to getting more into Will Durant's and Ariel Durant's Story of Civilization. I think the next book in that series I have to read is called Caesar and Christ. And it's kind of about the Roman Empire and how Christianity came up around that time. So anyway, that's me. I love to read, I love to play music, and I love to cut out the unnecessary things in my day and my routine to allow me to be more creative and allow me to be in daydreaming mode more, where I can just let these ideas simmer in my mind. And I wanted to share with you how I managed to get through 85 books this year. It was quite the journey. It was quite the year, quite the challenging year. I read less audiobooks this year than I would typically because I was on tour a lot less. Touring pretty much stopped in March due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So I did find more time to, sit still and read and garden and just be kind of more of a homebody, which I actually have really enjoyed, that side of things. So thanks very much for watching this video. Let me know in the comments if there's been a particular book that you've read that has changed your life or influenced you, or that you'd like to share and recommend. Also, let me know if you have any questions, and And, you know, I'd be curious to know what people out there feel is, you know, what you feel is the biggest challenge or the biggest roadblock in you know, reading. Is it, you know, finding the time in the day? Is it actually concentrating? What is it? I'd be curious to know, because, yeah, I want to get a better feel for how I can read more and how I can be better and how I can communicate this message more, because it's definitely one I'm passionate about. I'm turning 30 in May, and feeling more and more of a responsibility to spread good ideas and to communicate my passion for learning and realizing our potential. So thanks very much for watching this video.